Thank you. So first, I would just really like to say thank you so much for having me here today. And I just want to say how humbled and honored I am to be here. I would also really like to say thank you to the Nevada Partnership for Homeless Youth from the bottom of my heart for saving my life. And I know it may sound a little overboard or over-exaggerated, but it's not. They truly did. And if it wasn't for the amazing staff that guided me every step of the way while in this program, I really don't know who or where I'd be today. I'm also really happy that Raj mentioned how it takes a village to raise a child, because it absolutely does. And I feel like I'm a pretty decent product of that saying. And I mean, there was times, thank you. Thank you. I mean, and I really love that saying because there were times in school where I actually felt like I had an advantage over a lot of my other peers, because where they had two parental figures to ask, questions to or get advice from, I had a staff of 20. So I felt like I was very, very lucky for that. So now before we get started, can I ask everyone to do me a favor and just close your eyes with me for a minute? Close your eyes and think about when you were 14 years old. Do you remember what 14 felt like? Do you remember the thoughts, the smells, the feelings you had then? You're probably just in high school, a freshman maybe. You're probably a little gawky, a little awkward, a little insecure. I see some heads shaking. Maybe you're the coolest kid in town, I don't know. But just really take that in. And if that's way too far away for you to imagine, think about a niece, a nephew, a son, or a daughter. But just really think about that for a minute. Okay, now open your eyes. Now that you guys have that age in your mind, I'd like to take this time to share with you my experience at 14 and how I eventually became a client, if you will, of the Nevada Partnership for Homeless Youth. So I still remember it like it was yesterday. I had just moved to Las Vegas 6 months prior with my family, and I'm adjusting to a new school, trying to make new friends as I try to find my way through my freshman year with all the insecurities that every 14-year-old boy already has, right? Now, it all began on my way home after watching my very first Powder Puff game. So it was about 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and just to give you guys a bit of a background, I had gotten into a very big argument with my mom the day before, so I hadn't been home in over 24 hours. And on my way home, all I could think about was, everything I could possibly say to try to calm the waters of our feud. But for some reason, the closer I got to my house, something just, the worst things felt. Something just didn't feel right, and I wasn't exactly sure why. And as I approached, all of a sudden my heart started beating a little faster, and I got this rush of anxiety throughout my body as I reached over to open the gate that surrounded my house. And I walked forward, got to the front door, and the door's locked. But as I was making my way to the front door, I had noticed that there were 2 windows that faced the street that had both their blinds up. So I made my way back over to the front of the house to go to one of the windows. And every step that I took, for some reason, just felt heavier and heavier and heavier. And finally, after I approached one of the windows, I still couldn't see inside because it was dark. So I remember just cupping my hands over my eyes and looking inside. Everything was gone. My entire house, empty. And I just remember taking a step back to try to compose myself, but at that point, how could you, right? And that's when it really hit me. This was real. My mom had actually abandoned me. She was gone. And now I'm all alone. And I remember just standing there in front of my house for some time, just trying to gather all my thoughts. And wouldn't you believe it, the first thing that came to my mind was I have school tomorrow. It's the craziest thing. And I just remember picking up my backpack, throwing it over my shoulder, and making my way to the only other place that I knew, my high school. Now, I walked around for some time, but finally settling here, the top of the press box of my high school bleachers. This is where I ended up living for the next several months, telling no one that I'm homeless. Now, I've told this story so many times before, and it always changes. Not the facts, though as I get older, I am willing to give more and more details about that part of my life, but the emotions that run through me when I share my story, that has changed completely. Now, what I mean by that is, at the time, and even a few years following, my heart was cold, hard, and bitter, and I wasn't fully capable of understanding or comprehending what I had actually gone through. And now as an adult, looking back at that 14-year-old me, emotionally, I'm just like, wow, I cannot believe that's something that I actually went through. And that's what I want from everybody here today, is to not just see homeless youth physically, but to now use my story to be able to see them emotionally. Now, in the mornings, I would wake up and I'd go to the water fountains right next to the bleachers. I'd throw some water in my hair and I'd brush my teeth. I didn't have any toothpaste, but I brushed them. And just like that, I'd make my way to my first period class, like nothing ever happened. I joined every after-school program just so that I could stay indoors as long as possible. Sometimes I would go to classmates' houses to study. Classmates study. Not really, I mean, barely had friends at the time. But I would go to their houses, and when they weren't paying attention, I'd say, hey, can I use the bathroom? And I'd jump into a shower real quick. I'd jump back out. Or when they'd leave the room, I would steal a pair of clean underwear, a pair of clean socks. And that's how I accumulated my wardrobe. I mean, and I began to learn every trick in the book because I adapted to my environment. And that's what you do when something like that happens to you. You adapt to your environment. Now at school, I could eat breakfast and lunch off of a free and reduced lunch program. And at night, well, dinner was a different issue. Sometimes I would go to classmates' houses to study and stay as long as possible in hopes that I'd be invited for dinner. But when that didn't happen, which was realistically about 98% of the time that didn't work, I resorted to stealing. Now, there was a 7-Eleven right around the corner from my high school that I used to go to all the time. And there was a clerk that worked there, maybe in his mid-30s, but he was always there. Same guy, every time. And I'll never forget the first time I stole from this 7-Eleven. I walked in, I grabbed a few things, maybe some chips, I think some donuts, and something to drink. And I just remember just running out of there as fast as I could. I mean, I bolted. I thought half of Las Vegas was behind me with pitchforks and torches. I made it, I think, 20 blocks before I decided to turn back around to see if anybody was behind me. And nothing. I thought to myself, wow, I'm either really fast or that guy, he can't catch me. I'm good. And so I waited about a day, and then I went back. I was like, I'm just gonna go. I'm hungry. And I went back, and I did the same thing. I grabbed a few things, and I ran out as fast as I could. Only this time, I waited, or I went maybe 5 blocks before finally turning around. And still nothing. I really just remember thinking, God, this guy is so lazy. This is easy. Come on. And I was like, well, I guess I know where I'm gonna eat dinner for the next, for the rest of the year. And I went there every single day. And that's where I ate my food. And then, all of a sudden, summer came. Now, this is a time when kids my age at the time were really excited for summer break. But for me, my breakfast and lunch were gone. I just remember thinking, God, I'm screwed. But then I had a bright idea. I went to go pay my friend at the 7-Eleven a visit. But this time it was different. And it was the most miraculous thing that's ever happened to me. And I'll never forget that either. I remember walking in, and the first thing I saw at the end of the counter was a packed lunch and a drink sitting there waiting for me. And I remember looking up at the clerk, and he looked at me, he looked at the lunch, and he just kind of looked away. And that's when I noticed this guy wasn't lazy. He knew. He saw me. And instead of chasing me out or calling the police, he decided to help. I'll never forget that exact moment either. I mean, I remember reaching up for the lunch and just taking it off the counter and just looking down in complete shame and just mumbling under my breath, "Thank you," as I walked out. That man did the exact same thing for me every single day for the rest of that summer. It was remarkable. Now, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. There were times when I really wanted to give up. There were times when I doubted I was going to make it. Just wondering, is all that life has to offer me on top of that stupid press box? I couldn't believe it. There's no way. Now, a lot of you are probably wondering, well, why didn't you just go get help, you idiot? But it was because my biggest fear at the time was that if I was to be turned into the police or to child services, I was only going to be dragged from school to school, having no say in where I ended up. I was going to be forced into a system where abuse is rarely reported. A system often known as the system for bad kids. Not abused kids, not neglected kids, not abandoned kids, just bad kids. Now, today when I talk, I ask everyone to take what I say as a sign of commitment to understanding. To those who are out on the streets struggling to eat tonight, and to those who have made decisions that are not them in order to survive. It's a commitment to a greater community. It's a commitment to understanding that there is a kid just like me out there right now with no one and nothing. Life in full, it's a commitment to healing. Now, ultimately, there was a teacher. This isn't really her. I found her on Google. But ultimately, there was a teacher who knew that something was wrong, but who was compassionate enough to take me in, to find me the proper help, and to get me to a place that would not only give me shelter and resources, but a very beautiful place that would also let me have a say in where I went to school and what I wanted for my future. Ladies and gentlemen, the Nevada Partnership for Homeless Youth. Yeah, go ahead, yeah. Now, there are kids that will run tonight out of fear from abuse because their family has abandoned them. They might find their way to the top of a press box, to a gang, to the back of a dumpster, or to a pimp. But maybe before these kids adapt to survive, maybe we can adapt, change the way we see them. Maybe we can stand with them to amplify their voices so that they're not treated as property anymore, able to have a say in where they feel safe. Maybe we can get them into a program like the Nevada Partnership for Homeless Youth that can give them the shelter, the resources, and the freedom to make their own decisions. And maybe, just maybe, we can help them realize their full potential. Now, according to the Covenant House organization, I know I'm going to sound like a broken record. We've had a lot of statistics today. But according to the Covenant House organization, in 2016, it was recorded that there was 1.6 million kids out on the streets doing that, surviving. Now, this number may shock a lot of people, but that's the number. That's seriously about the exact same in size of Phoenix, Arizona in population. An entire city of kids running from someone, hiding from someone, or discarded by someone. All without a series of adults who care enough to see them differently. Now, I began to see myself differently. Now, I want all of you and everyone you guys speak to after today to see other homeless youth differently. I want you guys to see what that man from the 7-Eleven or that teacher and everyone else in my life saw in me and them. Now, I'm almost done, I promise. Now, I'm often asked, gee, if you could give any advice to a kid that has been in your situation or is currently in your situation who wants to get out of it, what would you say to them? And for the longest time, I struggled with this question. I didn't exactly know how to answer it. And I started to think, well, was it all luck? No, surely it couldn't have been. And even if there were some lucky situations, I had to have done something to have gotten me to those lucky situations if they were lucky. So then I started taking myself back to day one. Well, what happened day one? Well, I fell. I hit rock bottom. But it was how I fell that mattered. You see, I fell on my back. And one of my favorite speakers actually says it best. He says, if you fall, make sure you land on your back. Because if you can look up, you can get up. And that's what I did. I landed on my back. And after I landed on my back, I had to have the courage to get up. Now, this is something everybody in here can relate to, homeless or not. We've all fallen. Everybody's fallen really, really hard to the point where you just kind of lay there and you don't want to get up, right? Because you don't want to find out what's been broken or what's been scratched or bruised. It's having that courage, though, to get up, to finally see where those wounds are so that we can mend to them. So I had to have the courage to get up. After I got up, I found something that really actually changed everything. And it was becoming obsessed with something. And my something at that time was not being homeless. I mean, I was obsessed with it. I was so obsessed, I'd steal clothes from kids I barely knew just so that I could look normal. I was obsessed with not being treated differently. I was obsessed with wanting a different life than what I had. And then that brings me to my next 5 points that I used not only at that time to get me out of homelessness, but that I use every single day in every part of my life now. And the first thing was deciding. At the time, I had to decide that I was no longer going to be homeless. I just decided this is not what I wanted to do. Number 2 is commitment. I committed that this is something that I was going to do. I committed that I was going to do everything in my power to find someone or speak to someone to get me out of this. Number 3 is act. I finally decided to take action. I reached into my backpack to grab that phone number that teacher gave to me just right before the year ended. But I took action. And then after she came, she helped, we took action together to get me to NPHY. I took action. That's number 3. Number 4 is success, or succeed. Now, a lot of people think that this should be the last thing on anybody's list, right? But to me, success is not an end point. Success is kind of a point you hit and then constantly maintain. It's a journey that never ends. I hate this word, but I guess you could, it's a piece of luggage that you carry around for the rest of your life. And as long as you have this piece of luggage, you're never going to fall back down. And it's just a constant maintenance of that success prior. And then the 5th thing is repeat. You use those first 4 things in every aspect of your life, and I guarantee you something is going to change. You're going to make a difference. So just a quick little recap. I know you guys were all listening, but we'll do it again. It was decide, commit, act, succeed, repeat. You guys, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. Thanks, brother. Thanks.